And I was honored when I was chosen to serve in the grand jury, to see the other side of the judicial system, to learn the education is priceless.
And the qualifications for being a grand juror are absolutely none. You need to live in Baltimore County. You need to be able to understand English and understand situations that you'll find other people in, and be able to accept cases at face value and just make a decision if there's enough evidence that yes, this person needs to go to court, no, this person doesn't.
I'm happy that I was chosen to be on the grand jury because it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I never knew all the stuff that we're learning in the grand jury. I never knew about it. It was just like, you know, you read in the papers or you never heard of it, but when you get in here and actually hear cases and when you go places, it's just wonderful. It just really enlightens you that all these things are happening. Positive and negative things are happening in the community.
I would recommend that if anyone is called for grand jury, don't hesitate to sign on for it, because it will be an experience you wouldn't want to pass you by.
Your selection as a grand juror is an honor and a responsibility. You are an important part of the administration of justice in our community. The court hopes that you will find your grand jury duty a rewarding experience, and we trust that after you have concluded your service, you will realize the importance of the grand jury system in the overall administration of criminal justice in Baltimore County. On behalf of the judges of the Circuit Court, I thank you for your service.
Over the next few minutes, you will be given an overview of the grand jury system in Baltimore County. The program is designed to explain your role and importance as a grand juror in the criminal justice system, how you were selected for grand jury duty, some of the legal terms that you will come in contact with, and some of the individuals that you will meet during your grand jury service. This presentation is also designed to assist you in understanding the primary powers and duties of the grand jury. It will describe the things you are required to do and some of the things that you cannot do.
All in favor
Please
of
pay
this
close
indictment?
attention to this information. It will assist you in fulfilling your upcoming grand jury responsibilities.
Thank you.
The grand jury system is of ancient origin, rooted in the common law of England. In its early time, it issued charges and acted as a court. Today, the role of the grand jury is more limited. In Maryland's federal and state court systems, the grand jury stands as an important part of the administration of criminal justice. The major function of the grand jury is to determine if there is enough evidence to charge an individual with committing a crime.
It is important for the new grand jury to be aware of what the grand jury is not. First, the grand jurors are not asked to decide the guilt or innocence of someone charged with a crime. This is the responsibility of the judge or the petit jury after a jury has heard the case. Instead, your job is to decide whether there are sufficient reasons for what we call probable cause for the accused to be charged. The grand jury only hears the state's evidence. Because the grand jury does not decide the guilt or innocence of an individual, it does not hear the defense side of the case. Because the grand jury decision is limited on whether there is sufficient evidence for the state to proceed, the state does not present its entire case, but rather only those facts that are necessary and important for the jurors to decide whether to charge. To maintain the schedule of cases and allow the grand jury to accomplish its work, it is important that the grand jurors understand that each case cannot and should not be a presentation of the entire state's case. It is necessary that questions by grand jurors should be limited to the issues directly pertaining to the evidence sufficient to charge. If there is sufficient evidence, the grand jurors should return an indictment, also known as a true bill, against the accused. If evidence produced is improbable or insufficient, then it becomes the duty of the grand jurors to dismiss the charge.
The grand jury is composed of 23 members, Baltimore County citizens just like you. You have been selected on a random basis through a computer search of the voters' registration records of Baltimore County and other approved source lists. No one can volunteer to be a grand juror. The computer must select your name.
The length of service for the grand jury is 4 months. You will ordinarily meet only 2 days a week, usually on Mondays and Wednesdays. There must be 12 members present at any session in order to constitute a quorum of the grand jury. At least 12 members must vote for charging the accused in order to have a valid indictment. Agreement by at least 12 members is required before any action can be taken. Another fundamental requirement of the grand jury is that all proceedings are to be kept secret. This rule of secrecy is the most vital provision for the protection of all persons accused, either justly or falsely. No one should learn what occurs in the grand jury room except as shown by the records of the court. This rule applies while cases are pending before the court and even after your term has expired. It is your legal duty not to discuss what occurred in the grand jury room with anyone or the reasons for any action you may have taken. The records of the grand jury are not open to public inspection, and it is a crime in the state of Maryland to divulge grand jury proceedings.
I think we all feel very empowered that we have some impact on what is happening here in the courthouse and in the county. It's an opportunity that I wouldn't have missed for anything, and an opportunity that very few people know about. It just came to me. I didn't ask for it. But to meld 23 people to work together, they meld themselves. It's been an extraordinary group. They all seem to take this so seriously. People who work all night, they still come in here in the morning and put in their time. And sometimes you go without lunch, sometimes you go without breaks. You just do what has to be done, and you feel you make a difference.
The grand jury room is located on the first floor of the county courts building. All sessions of the grand jury will be held here, unless directed otherwise. At the beginning of each term of service, the chief judge will select a foreperson and an assistant foreperson. The court clerk will be responsible for administering the oath to the 23 members of the grand jury, which bears out the importance of your duties. Beside presiding at all meetings, the foreperson takes the count of all voting during deliberations to make sure at least 12 people have voted to charge, signs all indictments, dismissals, or reconsiderations, and signs and verifies all daily attendance records. You will select from your members the secretary, whose duties include the recording of all indictments and other actions of the grand jury, and the maintenance of all attendance records, the oath clerk, and a door monitor.
At the beginning of each session of the grand jury, the assistant state's attorney assigned to the grand jury will provide you with information regarding the elements of the alleged crime and will also question the witnesses that come before you to testify on the crimes. Most of these witnesses will be law enforcement officers who investigated the case or who actually observed the criminal violation as it occurred. The following is an example of a typical case presentation that you will observe on a regular basis during your service. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Debbie Robinson. I'm an assistant state's attorney for Baltimore County. Today we are here to present the case of State versus John Smith. This is Officer Jones. Will the oath clerk please swear in the witness?
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly declare and promise testimony that you're about to give before this grand jury?
It is important to pay close attention during the presentation of the case. On most occasions, a single state's witness will appear before you and testify. No more than one witness can be present in the grand jury room at a time.
Ladies and gentlemen, the case that I'm going to present to you now against Mr. Smith involves the following charges: robbery with a dangerous and deadly weapon, common law robbery, second-degree assault, theft under $300, and the carrying and wearing a deadly weapon. Now, robbery with a dangerous and deadly weapon is the taking and carrying away of property from another person by force or threat of force. Common law robbery is a crime that originated in England. It's a very old kind of crime, and it is now interpreted by appellate case law. Second-degree battery or second-degree assault includes assault and battery, which is any unlawful touching of another human being. It could be forceful, it could be slight, but it is without their consent. Theft over $300, theft under $300 is just that. Taking some property, could be money, a purse, a wallet, someone's car from another person, and the value could be, a purse valued at $60 and inside is a $20 bill, so the loss is $80 to that victim. Carrying a dangerous and deadly weapon means that a person had a weapon of any kind that could do serious bodily injury or cause death to another person, such as a baseball bat, a handgun, a knife, anything that you can think of, brass knuckles. In this case, you'll hear the officer discuss a pellet gun. It doesn't always have to be a handgun to qualify as a dangerous and deadly weapon. Anything that can do serious bodily injury or cause death to another person qualifies in Maryland as a dangerous and deadly weapon. Officer Jones, could you please tell us how long you've been a member of the Baltimore County Police Department?
7 years.
And where are you currently assigned?
Wilkins Precinct Investigative Services Unit.
Can you please tell the members of the grand jury what you know about the case against John Smith?
Yes, ma'am. On the night of November 16th, 1996, I was working in the area of Wilkins Avenue and Maiden Choice Lane, which is within Baltimore County and Wilkins Precinct. At that time, a call came over the radio for an armed robbery in progress at the Nation's Bank, which is located within that shopping center. I responded to that area, and a lady standing at the ATM began to yell and shout at me and point towards a car, towards a brown Chevy, yelling to me that that person had just robbed her. As that vehicle left the parking lot, I made my dispatcher aware that I was behind the vehicle possibly used in this robbery and that I was making a turn on to Maiden Choice Lane. I waited for backup and initiated a traffic stop. At that time, the defendant, Mr. John Smith, was identified as the operator of the vehicle. My backup officer then responded back to the ATM machine to find the victim, transported the victim, Mrs. Brown, back up to my traffic stop, at which time she positively identified the subject, John Smith, as the subject who had just robbed her at the ATM machine. In further interviewing Mrs. Brown, she advised me that while she was at the ATM machine, the suspect, Mr. Smith, approached her from behind and stuck into her ribs what she believed to be was a handgun. She then was ordered to withdraw by Mr. Smith the maximum amount that her card would let her withdraw from the ATM machine. She withdrew the $200, gave it to him in fear for her life, and then he then fled the scene in the brown Chevy that she was pointing out to me as I arrived. At the time of, he was then arrested, of course, once she positively identified him, but at the time of his arrest, we did find $200 in his front right pants pocket, and we did locate what appeared to be a real firearm, a real handgun, but what was in fact a .357 Magnum replica pellet gun, an actual functioning pellet gun that, although it doesn't shoot a bullet, it does shoot a .177 caliber pellet, which if you're shot with it can either cause death or cause great bodily injury. The next day, we were able to respond back to the bank and obtain security footage of the video camera from the ATM machine, and the whole incident was captured on film. It was in fact, the suspect, John Smith, was captured on film approaching and speaking to Mrs. Brown on film at the time she reported the crime.
Thank you, Officer Jones. Would anyone from the grand jury like to ask Officer Jones any questions about this case?
Did the ATM video show the gun on its film?
No, ma'am, it did not, but what it did show was him pressed right up against her and the obvious startled look on her face from him sneaking up behind her.
Was the lady physically attacked or hurt in any way?
Your question was whether she was attacked or physically assaulted. Well, second-degree battery includes assault and battery, and when the suspect came up behind her and touched her or forced that gun, that weapon, into her side, that unlawful touching equals the battery. He placed her in fear because we know that from the officer describing the startled look on her face, she was placed in fear and therefore was forced to give over the $200 from the ATM machine. So even though she wasn't physically injured and didn't have to go to the hospital, she was still assaulted and battered.
Does this guy have a previous record?
We can't tell you whether or not this suspect has a prior criminal history or a prior criminal record. It's both unethical and improper and illegal, really, for us to disclose that kind of information. We want you to base your decision whether or not there's probable cause in this case on the facts that we've presented to you here today, not on whether someone has done something, you know, at the age of 16 or did something when they were 21. That's really not relevant. You have to focus on the facts and the evidence that's presented to you here today.
How were you able to respond to the robbery so quickly?
We found out later that it was called in by a witness on a cell phone.
Do you all have any other questions for the officer or myself? No other questions? Okay, thank you very much. The officer and I will step outside to await your decision on this case.
All information will have to be considered in your deliberation process. It is also important to note that no person under accusation or investigation has the right to appear before the grand jury or to offer witnesses on their behalf. Remember, this is not a criminal trial. The Assistant State's Attorney is the legal advisor to the grand jury and is responsible for furnishing you the answers to legal and procedural questions that may arise from time to time. The Assistant State's Attorney, however, cannot remain in the grand jury room during your deliberations or while a vote is being taken. Your deliberations are secret.
On some infrequent occasions, it may be necessary for the court to appoint a court stenographer to record proceedings of the grand jury. During your deliberations and vote, the court stenographer must leave the grand jury room. After the Assistant State's Attorney presents the case to the grand jury, he or she will then provide an indictment or true bill, which is a formal written accusation. Should you determine from all of the evidence presented that there is probable cause for the accused to be charged with the crime stated in the indictment, then you should vote for the indictment. When at least 12 grand jury members vote for indictment, the foreperson will then sign the true bill. The purpose of an indictment is to inform the accused of the charges so that he or she will have an opportunity to prepare a defense.
It is also important to know that it is improper for anyone to attempt to influence any individual member of the grand jury in the performance of his or her duties. If any attempt is made, in writing or otherwise, you should promptly bring the facts to the attention of the Assistant State's Attorney.
At the end of each session of the grand jury, when indictments are considered, the foreperson of the grand jury, or the assistant foreperson, and the Assistant State's Attorney will take the signed indictments to a judge of the circuit court for review. The indictments are then taken to the clerk's office for formal filing. You will have an opportunity to hear many presentations and to visit many of the state and local facilities that relate to the criminal justice system during the course of your grand jury service. You will visit such institutions as the Charles Hickey School, the Baltimore County Bureau of Corrections, and the Maryland State Police Crime Lab. Information on these visits should be incorporated into the final report of your grand jury service.
The tours were wonderful too. You know, as an employee of the state, to get the opportunity to see the county system work and to see the juvenile system work was wonderful, right? I wouldn't trade this opportunity for anything in the world.
At the end of your term of service, it is customary to submit a report summarizing the grand jury's activities, commenting upon the general conditions in the community as they relate to enforcement of the criminal law and the administration of criminal justice, and recommending any measures for improvement of the criminal justice system. However, the law prohibits criticizing any individual in your report. The report of the outgoing grand jury, as well as previous grand jury reports, should you request them, will be available to you through the Jury Commissioner's office and your foreperson. You may be able to achieve some continuity of thought and action with other grand jurors by carefully reading these reports.
Unless you are a witness in a trial, jury duty is about the only time that a citizen may take part in the administration of justice. Grand jury service is certainly one of the most important and interesting duties an American citizen is called upon to perform. This is evident by the comments of our former grand jurors.
I'd just like to say I was formerly a 911 operator for Baltimore County, so I did see a lot of and hear a lot of things that occur within Baltimore County. But being a grand juror, I was exposed to a lot of things that I never knew existed. And I am very glad that I had this opportunity to experience this side of the legal system and see the outcome of these cases that we've heard on taping for 911. And if you ever are called for a grand jury, please don't hesitate to accept it, because it is truly an educational experience.
Met some wonderful people. I'd love to do it again.
I'd like to say that my experience on the grand jury has been very educational, and I tried very hard to get out of doing this because of the long amount of time that it's like 4 months of coming 2 days a week, and I came up with every excuse in the book, but I am very glad that I did have to come, and I am doing my civic duty. And I have learned a lot. I've met a lot of interesting people. We've had a lot of heartbreaking cases, but you just get an overall picture of how the judicial system works, and it's just a great experience that I think everybody should get at least one chance to do this.
If I could serve again on the grand jury, I would be only too happy to do so, because it has been truly a wonderful experience.
America is one of just a handful of countries in the world that respects its citizens so highly that it calls upon them to sit in judgment of fellow citizens. This is one of the major differences between our government and many other forms of government the world has known. You should be secure in the knowledge that in your state, every case will be considered individually by grand jurors just like you.